when a flight attendant pointed her finger at one of the most respected actors in Hollywood and told him to take off his hat or get off the plane, nobody in that first-class cabin could believe what they were hearing. It was a regular Thursday morning at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City. The clock above gate B-22 read 7:43. People were boarding, finding their seats, sliding bags into the overhead bins. Nobody expected anything unusual to happen. And then Denzel Washington walked through that cabin door, wearing a faded gray hoodie with a small coffee stain near the cuff, a worn Yankees baseball cap, the brim bent from years of folding it into back pockets, reading glasses hanging from a thin cord around his neck, white sneakers that had seen at least 4 winters of New York slush. In his left hand, a thick screenplay bound with a black rubber band. In his right, a small leather travel bag with the airline tag still curling from the last trip. He was not loud. He was not making any kind of scene. He was doing the same thing every other passenger was doing, looking for seat 1A. But one flight attendant looked at him and decided something needed to be said. Said in front of everyone. Said loud enough for 4 rows to hear. Said sharp enough to freeze the entire cabin. And here is the part that nobody saw coming. Because the story of what happened on American Airlines Flight 1187 from New York to Los Angeles, departing at 8:15 in the morning on February 19, 2026, is not just a story about a flight attendant and a famous actor. There is a man sitting in seat 3D, 62 years old, with a worn leather notebook on his tray table and a small audio recorder running in the inside pocket of his blazer. There is a manuscript he has been writing for 4 years that begins with the death of his older brother in 1978. There is a secret nobody on that aircraft knows. Not the flight attendant. Not Denzel himself. Not yet. And when every piece of this story clicks into place, when the silence finally breaks open, it will change the way you understand every moment that came before it. Stay with us all the way to the end. Because the beginning of this story is not what you think. And the ending is something we promise you will not see coming. The first-class cabin of Flight 1187 went completely quiet. Not the soft quiet of a cabin at cruising altitude. Not the dim quiet of overnight flights when the window shades come down and blankets come out. This was a different kind of quiet entirely. The kind that presses on the chest. The kind that makes the air itself feel heavier. The kind where every single passenger stops at exactly the same second, like sunflowers turning towards something they cannot yet name. A woman in seat 2C stopped pouring sugar into her coffee, the small white packet frozen between her thumb and forefinger. A man in seat 3A looked up from his Wall Street Journal and forgot to look back down. 2 women in row 4, dressed for a business meeting in Beverly Hills, stopped talking mid-sentence, one of them with her mouth still half open around a word she would never finish. And in seat 3D, a tall man with gray hair pulled into a short ponytail, wearing a navy blazer that had seen better decades, slowly, very slowly, slid his right hand into the inside pocket of that blazer, and pressed a small silver button on the device he kept there. Nobody had given a signal. Nobody had announced anything. They had all simply felt it. Because there was a man standing in the aisle of that aircraft holding a thick screenplay against his chest, like it was a private thing. 7 decades of life on his face. Hair grayed at the temples, eyes that had looked into stadium cameras and Oscar audiences, and the lenses of 1,000 directors, but were now looking quietly down at a boarding pass to check the row number one more time. Denzel Hayes Washington, Jr., born December 28, 1954, in Mount Vernon, New York. 2 Academy Awards, 3 Golden Globes, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, a name that schoolchildren in every American classroom had heard before they could spell it. He was not making a scene. He was not demanding anything. He was doing the simplest, most ordinary thing a person can do on an airplane. He was looking for seat 1A, and then a voice came from the front galley. Firm, flat, already decided. "Sir," her read Vanessa. She was 41 years old, blonde hair pulled into a tight regulation bun, lipstick a careful neutral shade, posture straight as the edge of a closed book. She held a small laminated card in her hand, and her face had already made its decision before her mouth opened. "Sir, I'm going to need to see your boarding pass again. And I'm going to need you to take off that hat." Denzel turned slowly and looked down at her. "Excuse me? Your boarding pass. And the hat." We have FAA visibility requirements during the safety demonstration." He glanced around the cabin without moving his head much, just his eyes. The man in seat 2B was wearing a Panama straw hat tilted low over his forehead. A man in row 4 had a Boston Red Sox cap pulled down over his eyes, earbuds in, head down. A woman in 1C had a silk scarf wrapped around her hair that covered both ears completely. Nobody had said a word to any of them. He looked back at Vanessa. His voice stayed completely calm. "I'm in 1A. Boarding pass right here." He held it out to her. She did not take it immediately. She looked at it the way a customs officer looks at a passport from a country she has been trained to be suspicious of. She looked at the name. She looked at him. She looked at the name again. Her eyebrows lifted slightly in a way that did not quite ask a question, but did not quite not ask one either. "And this is yours." 4 seconds of silence. 4 seconds in which every passenger within hearing distance understood exactly what had just been asked, and exactly what had not been said out loud, but had been said anyway. "Yes," Denzel said. "It's mine." Vanessa held the pass for another beat, then she handed it back. "I still need you to take off the hat, sir. And I'm going to need to remind you that first-class amenities are reserved for ticketed first-class passengers only. There's been some confusion on past flights, with people moving up from the back. So we're being very careful." The woman in seat 2C set her coffee cup down without taking the sugar packet off the rim. The man in 3A folded his Wall Street Journal in half along its existing crease, and then folded it again. In seat 3D, the man with the gray ponytail did not move at all. He had stopped breathing for almost 5 seconds. He had not realized he was doing it until his chest began to ache. His name was Daniel Reeves. Everyone who knew him called him Danny. He was 62 years old, a veteran foreign correspondent for the New York Times, who had covered 3 wars on 2 continents and had spent the last 4 years of his life writing a book he could not finish. The book was about his older brother, James Reeves, who had been 29 years old in the summer of 1978 when he was pulled out of his car at a gas station in Mississippi for what the responding officers called a suspicious manner of looking around. He had been a high school history teacher. He had been driving home to his fiancée. He had not made it home. The official cause of death was listed as cardiac event during routine encounter. Danny had been 18 years old at the funeral. He had spent the next 44 years writing about other people's tragedies in countries far from home, because writing about his own had felt like something he had not yet earned the right to do. He had finally started the book in 2022. He had 90,000 words, finished, and 1 missing piece. He did not know what the missing piece was. He had been waiting for it for 4 years. He recognized what was happening in front of him, at the front of that cabin within about 2 seconds. He had seen it more times than he could count. In hotel lobbies in Atlanta, in the lobby of his own apartment building in Manhattan, when his upstairs neighbor, an oncologist at Mount Sinai, had been asked by the doorman to use the service entrance. In the small daily moments that white passengers around him had never noticed and would, if asked, swear had never happened. He reached into the inside pocket of his blazer. He pressed record on the small Sony recorder he had carried for 30 years, and he waited. Denzel did not raise his voice. He did not say anything for almost a full 3 seconds. And in that 3-second silence, every black passenger on that aircraft, and there were 11 of them spread across the cabin, recognized exactly what they were watching, because they had all watched it before. In hotel lobbies, in luxury car dealerships, in the marble entrances of office buildings where doormen had asked them which delivery they were making. In every space in America where the unspoken question was the same. "Do you belong here? Are you sure?" He reached up, with one steady hand, and he took off the Yankees cap. He folded the brim once, the way he had folded it for 30 years, and he placed it carefully on top of his screenplay. He did not argue. He did not point at the Panama hat in 2B or the Red Sox cap in row 4. He simply lowered himself into seat 1A, knees folding with the careful slowness of a 71-year-old man who had learned long ago that some battles were not worth raising his voice for. He put the screenplay on his lap. He pulled out his reading glasses. He opened to a page marked with a small yellow post-it, and he turned toward the window. But here is what almost nobody on that flight noticed. Here is the small thing that one person, just one, would catch. His hand was shaking, just slightly, just for a moment. the hand holding the screenplay. It steadied within 4 seconds. It was the kind of tremor that comes not from fear and not from age, but from something else entirely. The thing that men of a certain generation feel when they have been reminded, in front of strangers, of every doorman who ever blocked their entrance, every clerk who ever followed them through a store, every teacher who ever assumed they were not the parent picking up the honor student. In seat 3D, Danny Reeves watched that tremor, and he wrote, in the leather notebook on his tray table, in handwriting that had been steady through artillery fire in Mosul and steady through earthquakes in Haiti, 4 words. The hand, the hand, the hand, the hand. He did not yet know who was sitting in seat 1A. The Yankees cap had covered most of the profile, and Denzel had walked in head down, focused on his row number. Danny had registered only an older black man in casual clothes. He had not yet seen the face. The cabin door closed. The jet bridge pulled away. The aircraft began its slow taxi toward runway 31L. And in the front galley, Vanessa Crane pressed both hands flat on the metal counter and breathed slowly through her nose. She had not slept properly in 11 days. Her mother, Eleanor Crane, 73 years old, had been moved on Sunday from the assisted living facility in Yonkers to a memory care unit in Queens that Vanessa could not actually afford. The Alzheimer's had progressed faster than any of the doctors had predicted. Her mother no longer recognized her on most visits. The good facility, the one in Westchester that Vanessa had researched for 2 years, cost $9,800 a month. The one her mother was now living in cost $4,200. It had a single common room with a television bolted to the wall and 3 aides for 16 residents. And the smell in the hallway was the kind of smell that no amount of disinfectant could fully cover. Vanessa had been working triple shifts since November. She had taken out a second mortgage on her 1-bedroom apartment in Astoria. She had cashed in the small retirement account she had been building since she was 23. None of it was enough. The good facility had a 6-month waiting list and a $15,000 deposit. She did not have the deposit. She did not have anything close to the deposit. She had received an email from the memory care unit at 6:12 that morning. Her mother had wandered out of the building twice the day before. The facility was now requiring an additional $1,400 a month for what they called enhanced supervision. The email had ended with the sentence, "We hope you understand this is for your loved one's safety." Vanessa had read the email twice in the employee parking garage. She had not cried. She had reapplied her lipstick using the rearview mirror. She had walked into the JFK terminal at 6:58 in the morning and clocked in for her shift, and she had performed every function of her job with the mechanical precision of a person who had decided that the only thing she could control today was the small kingdom of an aircraft cabin. And then a man in a faded hoodie had walked onto her plane. She had not recognized him. She would say later, in the formal statement she would eventually be required to write, that she had not been looking at faces that morning. She had been looking at uniforms, at conformity, at the visible markers of people who, in her exhausted and frightened mind, belonged in the seats they were sitting in and the spaces they were occupying. The hoodie had registered before the face. The cap had registered before the eyes, and she had spoken in front of 146 passengers in a voice she did not entirely recognize as her own. In seat 3D, Danny Reeves had finally seen the profile. The reading glasses had come on. The screenplay had opened. The light from the window had caught the bones of the face he had watched in Glory in 1989 and in Malcolm X in 1992 and in every film since. He set his pen down very carefully. He looked at his small recorder, still running in his pocket. He understood, with the cold professional clarity of a man who had spent 40 years recognizing the moment when a story turns from event into history, that he was now sitting 6 feet from a missing piece he had been waiting for since 1978. The flight took off at 8 minutes behind schedule. The aircraft climbed through a layer of New York winter cloud and came out into a clean white sun above 31,000 feet. The seatbelt sign turned off. The cabin lighting shifted to its cruise setting. Vanessa began the first-class beverage service. She moved through the rows with practiced efficiency. She offered hot towels with a smile that did not reach her eyes. She poured orange juice and sparkling water and a single mimosa for the woman in 2C. When she reached seat 1A, she paused for half a second longer than necessary. "Beverage, sir?" Denzel did not look up from his screenplay. "Coffee. Black, thank you." She poured it. She handed it to him without saying anything else. She moved on. The man in 2B, the one in the Panama hat, leaned across the aisle as she passed and said, in a voice low enough to be almost private but loud enough to carry, "Excuse me, miss. Just out of curiosity. Why did you ask him to take off his hat and not mine?" Vanessa stopped. She turned. Her mouth opened slightly. The cabin, which had been settling into the comfortable hum of cruise, went quiet again. Not as quiet as before, but quiet enough. She said after a beat, "Sir, that was a different situation." "I'm not sure how," the man in 2B said. He was about 60 years old, white hair, a small American flag pin on his lapel. He spoke without any anger in his voice, which made what he was saying more powerful, not less. "I have been wearing this hat the entire boarding process. You walked past me 4 times. I'm asking a question." "Sir," Vanessa said. Her voice had thinned. "I'd be happy to discuss this with you after we land. Right now I have a service to complete." "I'll wait," the man said. And he turned back to his window with the patience of a man who had served 26 years in the United States Marine Corps and had learned how to wait for things that mattered. His name was Colonel Raymond Hatcher, retired. He would matter again in about 40 minutes. In seat 3D, Danny Reeves leaned forward slightly. He caught Colonel Hatcher's reflection in the window. The two men did not know each other. But they did not need to. There is a recognition that passes between certain Americans of a certain generation when one of them decides to speak. Colonel Hatcher had decided to speak. Danny Reeves understood in that moment that he was about to decide the same thing. The drinks cart rolled on. The cabin returned to a kind of artificial peace. Denzel kept reading. The screenplay on his lap was titled in plain courier font on the cover page, "The Forgotten Letters." It was a project he had been quietly developing for 2 years. A film about a black schoolteacher in 1962 Birmingham who had spent his life teaching adult literacy classes for sharecroppers who had never been allowed to learn to read. The teacher had asked his students to write letters to public officials. Letters that would never be answered. The teacher kept the letters anyway, hundreds of them, in a wooden box under his bed for 40 years. The film was about the act of writing being its own form of dignity, of speaking even when nobody was listening, of insisting on existence in a country that had built 1,000 small ways to make you doubt your own. Denzel was the director. He had not announced it yet. He was flying to Los Angeles to meet with the producers and lock in financing. He had also accepted a private meeting that afternoon, one not on any public schedule, with a journalist named Daniel Reeves of the New York Times. Reeves had been writing him letters for 2 years asking for an interview about a book project. Denzel had finally agreed 3 weeks earlier. The meeting was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Denzel had been given a 1-page biography of the journalist by his assistant. He had read it on the train into JFK that morning. He knew about James Reeves. He knew the year. He knew the gas station. He had not yet looked up to see whose face matched the name. Danny Reeves, sitting 6 feet behind him in seat 3D, had also not yet looked up enough to see whose face was sitting in seat 1A. 2 men had been writing toward each other for 4 years across the long distance of American grief. They were about to meet 3,000 feet above the western edge of Pennsylvania in a cabin that had just become the most important room either of them had ever been inside. The flight continued. 40 minutes passed. They crossed somewhere over western Pennsylvania at 32,000 feet. Denzel set his screenplay down. He removed his reading glasses. He pressed the call button. Vanessa came forward from the mid-cabin galley. "Yes, sir. Can I get you something?" "I'd like to speak with the lead flight attendant." Vanessa hesitated. "That would be me, sir." "Then I'd like to speak with whoever is above you. The purser, I believe." The cabin shifted. Not loudly. Just the slow collective adjustment of 146 people leaning into a moment. The purser, a man named David Sullivan with 22 years of experience, arrived from the back of first class within 90 seconds. He crouched down beside seat 1A. "Sir, is everything all right?" "I'd like to file a formal complaint," Denzel said. His voice was quiet. It carried the way quiet voices do when the cabin is leaning in. "Not about the request to remove my cap. I'd like to file a complaint about the question that was asked when I presented my boarding pass." David Sullivan went very still. "Sir, I'm not sure I follow. The flight attendant asked me if the boarding pass was mine, not whether it was valid. Whether it was mine. I'd like that incident documented. I'd also like the gentleman in seat 2B to be added as a witness, as he observed the entire interaction and has already raised the matter himself." David Sullivan looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked at the carpet. She did not look at Denzel. It was at that moment that Danny Reeves stood up. He stood slowly. He was a tall man, 6'2", gaunt in the way of men who had spent decades eating in war zones and forgetting to finish meals. He walked the 4 steps from row 3 to row 1. He stopped beside seat 1A. He did not address Vanessa. He did not address the purser. He addressed Denzel directly, and his voice was the trained, careful voice of a man who had introduced himself to grieving families on 4 continents. "Mr. Washington, my name is Daniel Reeves. I believe we have a meeting scheduled for 4 o'clock this afternoon at the Beverly Hills Hotel." Denzel looked up at him. The reading glasses came off slowly. The recognition moved across his face in stages. The name first, then the face, then the brother, then the year, then the missing piece. "Mr. Reeves," Denzel said, "I have been recording the events of the last 43 minutes with the express knowledge that I am a working journalist on assignment. The recording is legal under New York and federal regulations governing one-party consent. I am submitting it as a sworn witness to the complaint you have just filed." The purser David Sullivan rose to his feet. "Sir, you cannot record on this aircraft without—" "I can," Danny said quietly, "and I have, and I will. The First Amendment does not stop at 32,000 feet. I have covered 3 wars and 28 years of civil rights litigation in this country. I know exactly what I am allowed to do, and I am doing it." He turned to Vanessa. She was standing very still in the aisle, both hands flat against her sides. "Ma'am, I want you to understand something. I am not your enemy. I am the person who is about to make sure that what happened to my brother 48 years ago does not get to happen quietly anymore. Not on my plane, not on my watch, not in my notebook." Vanessa's mouth moved without making a sound. Danny turned back to Denzel. He spoke quietly enough that only the first 4 rows could hear. "My older brother was killed in 1978 at a gas station outside Jackson, Mississippi. He was a high school history teacher. He was 29 years old. The officer who pulled him out of the car was never charged. The official report said cardiac event during routine encounter. I have spent 44 years trying to write his story. I could not figure out the ending. I could not figure out how a country moves forward from a thing like that without forgetting it. I have 90,000 words of a book in a Word document on a laptop in my carry-on bag. I have not been able to finish it, sir. I think I just found my ending." Denzel did not say anything. He looked at Danny Reeves for a long moment. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his hoodie and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. It was a printed biography of Daniel Reeves, the one his assistant had given him the day before, with 3 lines highlighted in yellow marker. He held it up so Danny could see. "I read about your brother last night," Denzel said, "on the train coming into the city. I was going to talk to you about him this afternoon. I think we should talk about him now instead." The cabin made a sound. Not a gasp. The sound 146 people make when they are all witnessing something they understand will be in newspapers within 72 hours. In the aisle, Vanessa Crane pressed her hand against her chest. Her uniform was still pressed, her hair was still pulled back, but her face had completely undone itself. She thought about her mother in the memory care unit in Queens. She thought about Eleanor Crane at 41 years old, the same age Vanessa was now in 1995, standing at the picket line outside the Brooklyn School District office, holding a sign that said "Equal Funding, Equal Futures," marching with 200 other parents for the desegregation of school resources. Her mother had taught her to march. Her mother had taught her to see. And somewhere in the last 11 sleepless days, in the cold calculations of facility costs and supervision fees, Vanessa had stopped seeing. She had become, on her own aircraft, in her own uniform, the exact kind of person her mother would have marched against. The recognition arrived all at once. It was not gentle. It was the recognition of a person who had been raised better than this, finally remembering what better looked like. She walked the 4 steps to seat 1A. She did not look at the purser. She did not look at Danny Reeves. She looked only at Denzel. She knelt down in the aisle, one knee on the carpet, in violation of every regulation in the flight attendant manual, and she spoke loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear her. "Mr. Washington, my name is Vanessa Crane. I was wrong. I was wrong in a way that I cannot fix with an apology, and I am not going to try. What I am going to do is sit at the corporate complaint hearing that is about to happen and tell the truth about what I said and why I said it and what it meant. I will not ask for my job back. I will not ask for understanding. I am asking you only this. When you make your film, the one I overheard you talking about, please make it. Please tell that story. Because my mother taught me that story when I was a child, and I forgot it this morning, and the only way the forgetting stops is if people like you keep telling it." Denzel looked at her for a long time. "Ma'am," he said finally. His voice was lower and rougher than before. "I am sorry about whatever is happening in your life that brought you to this morning. I do not know what it is. I am sorry anyway. But you understand that this is not yours to be forgiven for by me. The forgiveness, if it ever comes, belongs to the country. And the country is not done yet." Vanessa nodded. She did not say anything else. She stood up. She walked back to the galley. She picked up the cabin phone. She dialed the cockpit. She asked Captain Lillian Park to please record the rest of the flight in the incident log and to call corporate from the gate before disembarkation. Captain Park, who had been monitoring through the cabin camera feed, agreed without asking a single question. The flight landed at Los Angeles International Airport at 11:42 in the morning Pacific time. Vanessa Crane was placed on administrative leave at the gate by an airline supervisor who had been waiting on the jet bridge. The internal investigation, supported by Danny Reeves's audio recording, by Colonel Raymond Hatcher's signed statement, and by 20 other passenger witness forms collected before the cabin emptied, would conclude 4 weeks later. Vanessa would be terminated. She would not contest the termination. She would, however, write a public letter to the New York Times that began with the sentence, "I am the flight attendant who asked Denzel Washington if his boarding pass was his. I am writing this because the only thing worse than what I did is staying silent about why I did it." The letter would describe her mother. It would describe Eleanor Crane at the 1995 picket line. It would describe the 11 sleepless nights of February 2026 and the $4,200 facility and the small daily violences of being a caregiver in an American healthcare system that priced dignity out of reach. It would not excuse anything. It would name everything. It would close with the sentence, "I am writing this so that my mother, who can no longer remember my name, would recognize me again if she could." The letter would receive 48,000 comments in the first week. Many of them would be cruel. Many of them would not be. Danny Reeves would finish his book. It would be published in the spring of 2027. It would be titled Cardiac Event, A Brother's Account of an American Lie. The acknowledgments page would thank by name Mr. Denzel Washington, Colonel Raymond Hatcher, and Captain Lillian Park. It would also include one line at the bottom, slightly separated from the rest, and to VC, who broke the silence on her own behalf when she had every reason not to. We move forward together, or we do not move at all. Denzel would direct the forgotten letters. The film would be released in the fall of 2028. It would win 3 Academy Awards. Vanessa Crane would never fly again. She would find work as a caregiver at a memory care facility in Queens, the same one her mother had been moved into for an hourly wage that did not cover her old rent. She would move into a smaller apartment. She would visit her mother every morning before her shift. Eleanor Crane would die in the spring of 2027, 3 weeks after the publication of Danny Reeves's book. Vanessa would be holding her hand when it happened. Her mother had not recognized her in 9 months. But on the last morning, just before the breathing changed, Eleanor had turned her head slightly and said, very clearly, the name of her daughter exactly once. Denzel was asked about the flight in an interview 8 months later. He paused for a long time before answering. Then he said slowly, the way he says things when he has weighed every word, "A man taught me something on that flight." He had spent 40 years writing about other people's losses because his own was too heavy to lift. And when the moment came, he stood up. That is the whole country, right there. The people who have been waiting their whole lives to stand up. We need them to stand up. We need them to stand up loud. Because dignity is not a thing you defend by yourself. It is a thing you defend together, or it is not defended at all. The interviewer asked if he had forgiven the flight attendant. Denzel smiled. The small one, not the big one. The one that goes inward. That was never mine to give, he said. Forgiveness in this country belongs to the dead. James Reeves did not get to give it. My own grandfather, who was beaten by police in Virginia in 1948 and never spoke about it once, did not get to give it. Until the country reckons with what was taken from them, no one alive has the standing to forgive anything on their behalf. What we have, the living, is the chance to make sure that the next time it happens, someone stands up. That is all. That is enough. Here is what we want you to take from this story. Dignity is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not require permission. It walks into a room in a faded hoodie and reads a screenplay quietly in seat 1A while the world decides whether to see it. And the work, the real work, of making this country live up to its promises does not belong to the people who have been carrying it for 400 years. It belongs to the people sitting 6 feet away who have been quiet too long. It belongs to the colonels with American flag pins. It belongs to the journalists with small recorders in their pockets. It belongs to the flight attendants who remember what their mothers taught them. It belongs to every person who has ever watched something small and ugly happen in a quiet space and decided, in that moment, that they were going to use whatever voice they had. If you have ever watched something happen and stayed silent, this story is for you. The next time is the time you stand up. Not loud, not angry, just present, just true. Just the way Daniel Reeves stood up in row 3. Because the country does not move forward on the shoulders of its victims. It moves forward on the shoulders of its witnesses. Before you go, drop a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. Your city, your country. Your bedroom or your couch or your car parked outside your job on a long lunch break. We read every single comment, and we want to know where this community is gathering from across the world. If this story moved you even a little, if it made you feel anything at all, hit that like button. It takes 1 second, and it helps this story reach someone who needs to hear it today. Because the world has more than enough cruelty. What it needs more of is what one man in row 3 did at 32,000 feet. Patience, presence, and the courage to stand up. And if you are new here, welcome. Hit subscribe and join a community that believes the most powerful stories are the ones that remind us how to be better to each other. Now click on the video appearing on your screen, because we promise the next story is going to hit just as hard. We will see you there. Take care of each other out there. And remember the man in row 3. Remember what he chose, because the world will always give you a reason to stay quiet. The work, the real work, is choosing not to.